Good afternoon. Welcome back to another live stream. So today's going to be a quick one. I wanted to cover another topic around personal finances. So I've done a couple of videos around how to budget, different methods of budgeting. One's a very, very simple way of budgeting, which is according to the Rich Dad, Poor Dad method. And I've done another one based on the Barefoot Investor, which requires a little bit more effort. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing my key takeaways from an amazing finance book called The Total Money Makeover. So this book has helped, honestly, so many people get out of debt and really change their financial future. So I wanted to dive into this one. And in this particular book, Dave Ramsey, who is the author, he's also a radio presenter. So he talks about budgeting, but probably the most strictest way you can budget. So I wanted to discuss a few of the things that I learned from the book. So for those of you who maybe are really struggling financially, but you are quite organized. I don't know if that is even a possibility. Sometimes they go hand in hand. Or let's say if you've come from a background where you've just not really, I guess, had to look after your money, like maybe you've had someone else looking after it, and you don't really know how to get started. You maybe have some money ideas that you think is setting you up for failure. This is a great book because of especially that mindset aspect. So I'm just going to share my screen so I can write some points that I picked up from the book, and then we'll also go into a little bit about how Dave Ramsey recommends budgeting. Okay, so give me a moment. Okay, so so let's talk about firstly the Total Money Makeover. So as mentioned, it's a book by Dave Ramsey, and a big part of the book actually focuses on your money mindset and maybe some ideas you've had about money, some beliefs you've had about money that is potentially the reason why you are in the position you're in. So I'll be honest with you, reading this book is like being punched in the stomach. Dave Ramsey's style of writing is very just blunt, in your face, no filter. So if you find that type of thing motivates you, so if you're the kind of person that likes a little bit of tough love, you don't want people to sugarcoat it, you want them to just tell you as it is, it's a great book for just really changing how you think about money. That perhaps is the reason why you found yourself in a lot of debt and just struggling paycheck to paycheck. So a couple of the things that I guess wrote down as like, okay, as quotes from the book, I'm just going to share now. So the first one is a big one, and it's probably why it's the first one that I actually decided to note down, but it's about the idea of overspending. So he talks a lot about the world that we're in and the culture that is the norm now, which is quite different to maybe when our grandparents and great-grandparents lived. So the first thing he talks about is overspending that doesn't feel like overspending because things are going well. So that's really key, is still overspending. So he's making the point that a lot of us don't realize that our money habits are what are leading us down a path to ultimately finding ourselves in debt. So, feels like we're doing all right. We're spending more than maybe we should be spending. And a good sign of that is when bills come around. I mean, you make a pretty good amount of money, each fortnight, each month. But when bills come around, you're struggling to find the money. So that's a little bit of a sign of you're actually overspending. But it doesn't feel like you are because you feel like you're doing all right financially. So I thought that was like a really important one just to be aware about. Another one is it just makes me laugh, but there's just so many phrases in this book where it's like, okay, ouch, that really hurts, but yeah, maybe I needed to hear this one. But this is another one that I couldn't help myself and I just had to write down. Probably also because I'm a bit of a poet and I like the rhyming aspect of it. But he says, I owe, so off to work I go. So again, it's that idea that we're in this time where a lot of us are living off credit cards, and it's that whole thing again that we feel like we're doing okay. We've got, access to money, quote unquote money. But it's actually what is enslaving us when we are just essentially growing and growing our debt. So another thing that was quite a unique thing that I hadn't heard before that does relate to, as I mentioned, that very strict way of budgeting that Dave Ramsey is a big promoter of, is he talks a lot about using cash for everything rather than cards. And also this idea about taking control of your money and having power of your money, and it's almost like your money is your employee and you are dictating to you're a dictator really, but you're telling your money, this is where I want you to go, rather than your money ruling you and you just being like, oh, it's coming out here and it's coming out there, and by the end of the week, there's not much left in my account, etc. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that idea about cash. So he talked about studies, how when it comes to your physical card, it doesn't feel like you're spending because of just the ease of it. You just tap and it's gone. You don't even see the number. You're not as conscious of what's coming out. And it's probably not until you tap and then the checkout person says, oh, it didn't work, that you're like, oh, okay, what's actually in my account? But that whole psychology of tap and go, as convenient as it is, the downside is you don't feel the pain of spending money, which is how you so easily find yourself with not much left. So one of the things that Dave talks about in the book, especially for people who are trying to get out of a lot of debt, is getting into this habit of literally taking out their budget in cash and then separating it into literally envelopes. This envelope is for food. This envelope is for my petrol or gas, if you're in the US. This envelope is for most of those kind of day-to-day expenses. So I actually tried this just for the experience. And I'll be honest, I went through a really tough period financially because stuff happened with my family and it sort of affected all of us. So that's one of the reasons why I just became really just hungry to learn more, and I came across this book. So I actually tried that, instead of using my card, I'm going to take the money out in cash. And did I separate it in? I think I did do that, separating it in envelopes as well. It's been a while. uh, so just physically seeing the number and then giving it over, there's a painful aspect to it. You really feel that money that you're spending versus you don't even consciously even know what has just come out of your account because you just tap that, the person tells you the amount, and then it's like it's just actually not the same feeling when you tap versus when you hand over cash. Obviously, since this book was written, COVID has happened, and I know there's obviously places that maybe don't even accept cash. So obviously that's something that may make it a bit more challenging. But if you are really struggling with money and you want to try to start to, I guess, build a bit more discipline when it comes to spending, it is a great exercise to do, even if you only do it not for everything. You do it for, say, I'm going to put money cash, say with food, because maybe I overspend with food. Maybe I buy stuff that I don't actually really need, and then it ends up going off, and that's wasted money that could have gone to something else more important. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that one, just because it's an interesting one that was new to me. I hadn't heard it before, and when I tried it, it actually did help with just building that discipline to spend a little bit more consciously and certainly more frugally. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how Dave recommends budgeting as well. And in particular, this is his strategy for getting out of debt. So he talks about the envelope system. So I'm just going to just put some notes about that. So basically, this is how Dave talks about budgeting. So one is the envelope system. So gas is basically petrol for Australians. So essentially, with his envelope system, he calls it the zero-sum budget. So what that means is that every single dollar is accounted for. So when you get your money, you are allocating every dollar and telling it, okay, this portion is only allowed for food. This portion is allowed for entertainment. So you do have a budget where you can enjoy the money. So it's not all just sacrifice. This is for clothing. And obviously you would, when you're looking at it this way versus it's in your account, you go to the shops, you see a dress you like, you tap, you go, to the petrol station, you tap. So when it's just this lump sum and you're not really separating the money into what's more important, you may find yourself in a position where you're like, oh, I don't have enough money for petrol, but you bought a dress that week, So that's where, again, it's that building that discipline of essentially you're making these envelopes, you're taking out the money in cash, you're putting in money into food, which probably will be a little bit more, especially if you have a family. You put an amount in entertainment, in clothing, etc. And also with budgeting, even the strictest of budgets, it's never set in stone. So you're doing a review and seeing, well, I only put this much in food the last month and I found that it wasn't enough. I underestimated it, but I actually didn't spend as much on entertainment as I thought I would. So I'm going to put a little bit more from entertainment into food in the following month. So it's something you can play around with and adjust as you go. So that is one aspect of Dave's system of taking control of your finances. Firstly, creating that budget and being quite strict about your money. And it's almost like you're whipping your money and being like, nope, you are staying in that corner, you're staying in this corner, you're staying in this corner. So yeah, it's quite an interesting just way of looking at budgeting. I thought like it was like a more empowering way, I guess, of seeing it. But obviously, this is not for everyone, especially if you are really so new to budgeting. As mentioned in my description, I do have another video where I talk about a much simpler way. So if you try this and you're like, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to keep this up, then I definitely recommend look at that other video. But yeah, so that's the first thing is actually creating this budget. And I'll just make a note. It's called the zero sum budget. So everything is accounted for. So then next is we want to create an emergency fund. So an emergency fund of $1,000, which is your mini emergency fund. And then we're going to build on that a little bit later on. So he talks a little bit about that emergency fund. So I guess a lot of people are like, oh, you know, when it's a crisis, I wasn't prepared for this. But something that Dave talks about is that if there's anything in life that we can say is guaranteed is just challenges, because life, I mean, as a Muslim, we believe life is a test. So we do believe that it means it's not going to be just a bed of roses forever. But we also believe that it's an opportunity to build our character and to become stronger, to learn. It's kind of like they say, you know, the University of Hard Knocks. So I guess that's how I sort of see challenges in life. Is it's just part of a life. It is part of life, and it's how we deal with it and how we work with it that sort of separates us, I guess, in God's eyes. So just going back to the point of, so basically it's guaranteed that we're going to go through some kind of challenges in life, because that has been what's proven from our past. So it doesn't make sense that we wouldn't have something to cushion us in those challenging times. So that is the purpose of that emergency fund and the mini emergency fund. So it's just $1,000. And for people who are like extreme low income owners, Dave says, you know, even if it's just 500, just having that money in an account you don't even see and touch, or, you know, put it somewhere, lock it away. Like, this is money that you want to completely forget about, and you only remember it when, you know, God forbid, you're, you know, in a mini accident. Hopefully no one's hurt, but, you know, you're just like, oh no, or your car breaks down, for example. Your car breaks down, you desperately need it sorted for work. This is what that money is for. You know, if you've got that money, it turns what is a crisis for most people in society into just an inconvenience. So that's one of the key steps when it comes to this strategy to getting out of debt is, firstly, have a budget, and to create this emergency fund so that you have that safety net, because without it, you will find yourself just sort of stuck in a rut and back at square one. So the second step is something called his debt snowball method. So what you basically do is you list your debts from the smallest to the biggest. And, you know, there are arguments about, you know, the interest rate, you should pay the one with the highest interest rate, etc. But what's really interesting is he says, pay the smallest debt first, because this gives you this sense of achievement. So for people who are in a lot of debt, it's so just overwhelming. It's like to the point that they don't want to even look at what they owe. They don't even want to remember. And so it's kind of like just, a chicken burying its head in the sand, but it doesn't make the problem go away. So this is that first step with the debt payment aspect, is list it, get clarity on everything that you do owe, and pay off the smallest. And then, so let's say your smallest debt is a parking fine of $100, so you put that at the top. So then when you get your pay, you budget for, okay, I need to pay off the smallest debt, and then obviously you have to probably do your minimum payments of loans and things that you may have. But the idea is, once you've paid off that $100 on that first debt, your parking fine, then you snowball that into the second debt below it. So let's say it is speeding fines of $600. So you've paid off the 100, and now you can put that 100 towards the 600 speeding fine. And let's say you can't pay all at once, even with speedy fines, I often have like a payment plan. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm putting in, a little bit here and here and here, but as I knock off the top debt, that rolls down into the second one, and that rolls down into the third, etc. And before you know it, you'll be a long way away, or you would have made heaps of progress to actually tackling those biggest ones that you may have just been putting little bits into. So so that was just like another really great one. So finally, there's other stuff, but I just wanted to focus more around the debt side of things. So there's actually 7 steps altogether, and the later steps are, putting money towards your retirement, building a college fund or university, fund, etc., etc. But I just wanted to focus on just the things that are around paying off your debts, but also starting to save money. So I mentioned earlier that the first step after creating your budget is to set up a mini emergency fund of just $1,000 or $500 if you're really, really low income earner. So after you've achieved that and you're starting to pay off your debts, so the third step is to complete your emergency fund, which is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So this is where that budgeting at the very start will help, because that will start to give you an idea about how much you actually need for food, how much you need for your petrol, but also your bills, etc. And Dave, I believe, does have like a little app or a calculator on his website. So that's something you could look into. But essentially, why do you want to save this much? It kind of seems like a lot. And is it like really necessary? You just don't know what's going to happen in the future. For example, COVID happened and how many people lost their job? So imagine you had been implementing this and you had 3 to 6 months worth of money just at least to cover your food, your rent, your petrol to get to and from places. So you have honestly heaven compared to what other people will be going through, who haven't actually prepared for those, I guess, inevitable challenging times. So that is the purpose of that complete emergency fund. And then once you've saved that, then you can start to have fun and start to spend a bit more obviously just on enjoying luxuries and holidays and things like that. But even before that, which Dave does talk about in the book, is you can start to look at actually investing and growing your wealth. But yeah, so that does bring me to the end of this quick discussion about Dave's book, The Total Money Makeover. what I'm going to do is I actually created a spreadsheet that is related to this book, and then it's a way for you to work out, how much do I need actually to live off, and therefore how much do I need for my, bigger emergency fund, etc. So I'll probably discuss that in another video. But other than that, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, have a great weekend.